presenting AleXander Hirka, artist par excellence, editor of Smegma, colleague of Tuli's, creator of amazing works such as this photo montage, Urban Anatomy, which he presented at Burning Man.
To Revolting News, my name is AleXander Hirka. I'm an artist living in New York City, and I want to thank Thelma for inviting me to sit here and talk. I'm not used to this, so forgive me my whatever. I guess I wanted to start by talking about Tuli and my connection with Fugs and all of that and life. I grew up on the Lower East Side, and we eventually moved to Brooklyn and then the Bronx, and all throughout that period of time, when I was in my early teens, I spent most of my money on buying 45 RPM records, especially after the Beatles came around. I was hooked. I would go to House of Oldies in the Village, and I remember having to say $5.10 with tax for 1045 RPMs, and I would always buy whatever new was coming in. I didn't even know the stuff. I remember the first time they played a Doors record, and I was like, okay, I'll take that. I don't know what it is, but I bought it. And so music's just been this major thing in my life. It still is. And so as I got older, I would start going to concerts, and one of the concerts that stands out in my mind very powerfully is seeing the Fugs at the Fillmore East. It's a show with Moby Grape and the Gary Burton Quartet, and I remember I used to save the little programs from it, and you'd see 3-4 major acts for whatever it was, $5, $6, and anyway, the Fugs it was just a epiphanous moment. Their combination of politics, sex, poetry, everything coming together, it was in a way that I hadn't seen, and very raw and very real as compared to commercial pop and rock and all the rest of that. And that night was just absolutely magical to me, and I actually looked it up today that it was June 1st, 1967, which is now the Golden Filth album, which is out there on CD. I recommend it. It's still amazingly shocking compared to what's out there. And 67 was also the march in Washington to the Pentagon, where I'm not sure if it was all the Fugs or if it was just Tuli and Ed were there. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but they did their exorcism at the Pentagon, which I missed because my bus broke down somewhere in Delaware. But the Fugs were a major part to me musically at that point. I would buy everything they were putting out and just loved all of it. And it was years later, my connection with Tuli, the personal connection, was through a magazine that I was doing at the time called Smegma the magazine, which I actually think the first time that I heard that word creatively, other than in some science reference book, was in the inside of It Crawled Into My Hand, Honest, the Fugs album. There's a little poem in there of which one of the lines is, "We wax weary of tadpole smegma." And that just stuck in my mind, and for some reason or other, when I was doing the magazine, I had a partner at the time who called herself Saint Scarlatina Lust, and the two of us put the magazine together. And I don't remember how Tuli ended up in the magazine. I know we ended up going to his house. He, showed us artwork. He was just ridiculously gracious. I mean, he was so supportive. So, like, you guys are doing something? Here, let me help you in any way I can. And so we had his cartoons in, I think, the first 3 issues. We did 500 of the first one, then 1,000 of the next 3 issues. The first one is now completely, you can't find it, basically. It's kind of disappeared. The other ones are still around, and yeah, it was a labor of love. We had a printing house in Chelsea that really enjoyed doing it because they basically had regular print jobs that they did, and it was an opportunity for them to play too. It was like, you come in with this magazine, you want to mix colors, you want to do this, you want to do that, you have crazy cartoons, and so it was a creative process all the way around. And at that time I was also linked in with the Mail Art Network. It's kind of hard to explain, look it up, Google it. It's a network of artists all around the world who exchange mail, artwork through the mail. The history is, as all art histories, is kind of mixed. Ray Johnson is one of the first people who's kind of mentioned in that. And a lot of these artists were sort of linked to him, or John Evans from the Lower East Side was a big part of it. So I became friends with all of these people, especially in New York, and E.F. Higgins. And so all these people contributed to the magazine. It was a very nice, energetic local thing. The bookstore that's gone now on Spring Street was also very, very supportive. They just loved that there were local people doing this fun thing. They would put it in the front window, which was kind of wonderful. For the third issue, we did an audio montage, which I pretty much mixed by myself. Other people contributed stuff, but I do collage, photo montage, and this was just another opportunity to do that kind of thing, except with audio stuff. So we, in the third issue, had a free flexi disc, one of those little flat records that, which was called Hot Dog You Bet, which was a little sound bite from the Chipmunks record, where Theodore says, "Hot dog, you bet." So we took that clip and I interspersed it throughout. I just reminded, we actually put it on the back of one of the covers. We went out one night and spray painted "Hot Dog You Bet" on the four corners of what is that? Spring and, I want to say LaGuardia. No, it's the other.
6th Avenue?
No, one block down. In Soho. I mean, it's the main drag in Soho.
Broadway? West Broadway?
West Broadway. Yeah, West Broadway. Yeah, we went out and painted that. I mean, it was just a very creative period with a lot of energy. And, I remember going to Tuli's house and, him showing us the artwork. And as I was mentioning before, I have this, my memory is fading. But I have this great image of being in his house, sitting, talking with him, and that there was a wall as big as I've ever seen of books.
Yeah.
That one is, like I said, my imagination's probably stretched it now, but it seemed like forever of books, and that's just such a wonderful.
Do you have a copy of the magazine to show us? We'll try to zoom in and
well, I don't have number one. Like I said, they're
Yeah.
extremely rare, but
all right.
here's number two.
Let's see if
with
we
the
can get it.
picture of. We went out to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn.
That's where Tuli is now.
Right, that's funny. That's great.
Yeah.
And we attached this little shopping bag and a big smiley mouth onto one of the angels
Uh-huh.
and took a photograph.
Yeah.
And this was number 4, our last issue, with Einstein on it. And our number 3 issue, which was the sex issue, which had the flexi disc in it.
Mm. How much was it for a copy?
$1.
Yeah.
And we weren't planning on making money on it. We were hoping that we would, I guess get a pizza out of it or something. Or
Right.
it was obviously a labor of love and fun and all the rest. I mean, like I said, the energy that we created around it was just. I don't think any of those actually have them. We printed up the stickers that businesses use, with little label stickers. Mm-hmm. And we had those for Smegma the magazine, and they would have like an eye on them or something, and we'd go on subways and stick them onto the posters and stuff, so the eye would match up the poster of an advertisement for something. And we did. I mean, we felt like we were covering the city with those. We were just, it was our little external promotion of it. But so yeah, trying to think what else. The mail art stuff I did for about 4 years. I'm still in touch with a lot of the people. I ended up going to Europe years later and connecting with some of those people in Italy and Germany and France that I'd been corresponding with for years. Some were artists, some were just people who were sort of playful with the mail. Some people have compared it to the internet before there was an internet, because it was this network of became friends sharing artwork between each other.
So much easier now.
Yeah, but in some ways that makes it a little less involved. You know, when I would go, I used to have a post office in Chelsea near where I worked, and you'd go, you know, after work and pick up your mail, and there'd be 10 pieces of mail from all around the world.
Yeah.
And you always felt like you wanted to return with something really good. I think, you know, with Facebook or anything else, you can just fire stuff off. You know, it's very, very quick and easy, and there's not that much, you know, like sitting down. If you're going to address an envelope and, you know, rubber stamp it and put stickers on it and stuff, you take a different kind of care to it. On the other hand, it's very time consuming. I spent, you know, felt like I would come home and just work on mail art for years, and that just, you know, kind of wore out after a while. Historically, after that, I moved to Vermont. I got married. I, at that point, felt like I had used up the city and just was not using it anymore.
What year was that?
86, 87. Actually, the thing that was right before that was pretty great is after I got married, the two of us went to Europe for 6 months, and we traveled through 26 countries, backpacking. It was an absolutely amazing adventure. So then I moved to Vermont after that, and had 3 children, and that changes life altogether. So I settled down. I raised a family. I lived in rural areas. I mean, like real rural areas. I lived in a small town. I luckily never lived in a suburb. To me, that's the one part that's like, I don't think I could do. And my kids are great. They're wonderful. And kind of rolling along. 4 years ago, I was unemployed for a year and a half. And my kids were growing up and leaving home. One of them was staying with his mom. And so I had a big apartment for all of them at that point. We were separated. So we had kids week on, week off. And at that point, I didn't need the apartment. And my landlord conveniently came along and said that he needed the apartment. So I was unemployed, and all of a sudden had like 2 months to move out. So as awful as it was at the time, my landlord, I mean, he just needed the apartment. It wasn't it wasn't anything really evil. Other than the fact he could charge twice as much as he was charging me. But he said at that point to me, maybe someday you'll thank me for this. And it's a funny thing, because I really do, because between unemployment and not having a place, rather than deciding to stay there and try to rebuild my life in Vermont, I did what I'd been wanting to do for years, which was to get back to New York. This is my psychological home. There's no question about it. It's just, it's the place I want to be. And so it turned out for the best. I mean, I moved here and got a little room in Brooklyn with a bunch of roommates, because that seems like the only way you can live in New York unless you're lucky. And kind of, started rebuilding my life. I was unemployed for at least almost another year here.
When did you start creating these photo montages?
Well, I've been doing some variation of them from when I was living in New York before. So it's been decades I've been doing photo montage of some sort. I'm trying to think, in 2005, it's kind of another whole big episode of my life. In 2005, I needed something in my life. I needed a charge in my life. I needed a quick change. I needed something. And out of nowhere, discovered about the event out west called Burning Man. And so I, strangely enough, I'd never rented a car before on my own. I'd never flown on my own. I'd never camped by my own. None of these things. And that year I did all of it. I flew myself out to California, rented a car, bought a tent, set up a tent, all the stuff that I'd never done. And I was in the middle of what I consider, other than New York, my only other home. I mean, it's such a energizing, creative place that, that I've now gone 9 years in a row.
All right, tell us about Burning Man for people who don't know. I hear it's going to be in September again.
It's on what's that, Labor Day weekend, pretty much, for a week.
Yeah.
It's been going on for 25 years or 20 some years. It started in San Francisco when a group of artists brought this figure of a man to the middle of the beach in San Francisco and burnt it.
Does it have to do with Wicker Man?
No. It actually just, was one person's thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's kind of grown out of it. I mean, it obviously has similarities to it, but after a couple of years, San Francisco said the crowds grew bigger and bigger. You can't be doing this thing on a public beach. So they went in search of another place to do it, and the people who went out there looking for it came across the Black Rock Desert, which is about 100 miles out of Reno, which is nothing. I mean, it's dead. It's a lake bed that in the summer is just desert. There's no life on it whatsoever, not even insects or cactus or anything.
So where do you get water and food?
You have to bring everything, which is one of the great things about the event is you have to bring everything you need to survive for a week. And at the end of the event, I mean, there are volunteers who stay a month afterwards, but at the end of the event, if you went there a month after, there'd be no trace that it ever happened. And while it's there, this year it's going to be 70,000 people, which makes it like the third largest city in Nevada. I recommend anyone who's at all even interested in knowing what it's about, either do Wikipedia, which will give you information, or just go to YouTube and put it in as far as videos go, and you'll see it's just it's a magical thing, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And as a result, the people who went there the earlier years kind of regret. There was a lot more freedom when it was 1,000 people or 2,000 people. You had a lot of freedom. There were things like people supposedly they had drive-by shooting ranges, so people would drive their cars and shoot their guns. And obviously once you get to 20, 30,000 people, you just can't do that. So, it's a very, very organized thing. They go out there a month in advance. There are streets that are marked off. It's done in a circle, and there are streets marked off, and there's security, there's internal security. The state of Nevada has police there, so it's also all the bad things that can happen with police happen there. There are drug busts, there are,
does everybody bring their own artwork? Does everyone have something to contribute? Well,
the goal is to participate, it's kind of, there are 10 standards, 10 things that it strives for that have come up over the years. And participation is a major aspect of that. There are other things like that everyone can be included. I mean, I went the first, whatever it was, 4 years. I mean, a lot of it is major artwork. I mean, big structures, fire, things.
I've seen pictures. Yeah.
And the first few years I went, I kept looking. I do these photo montages. What do I do with it? And it took me that long to realize that in the Center Cafe they have a little camp type thing in the middle, which, as a side note, nothing at this event is sold whatsoever. I mean, there's no money involved. You can buy coffee and you can buy ice, but other than that, there's no commerce whatsoever, which is another wonderful thing. For that week, you don't barter, you don't deal with cash. You bring what you have, and if you have stuff, you share it, you gift it, you get it back. But I was going to say the artwork. There is a whole center camp part where they have artwork, regular, sort of flat, one-dimensional artwork to hang up. And it took me that many years of going there and going, wait a minute, I do stuff like this. And that's what kind of got me doing like some of these larger pieces that I have, because I
show them. Okay.
Sure.
I like to show some of these incredibly complex and detailed and interesting photo montages. There's one. and there's another. There's
The bigger ones came from Burning Man. I always did smaller pieces, but all of a sudden I had these large spaces where I could show my stuff. So I started doing these bigger pieces. That's from last year.
What are they called and what are they about?
The pieces?
Yeah.
Oh, well, this one was called, oh dear. Well, it had to do with gullibility. Last year's theme, they have a theme every year to help the artists come up with stuff. And last year's was cargo cults. I don't know if you know about cargo cults.
Yeah, I sort of do. I've heard of it.
And one of the things that struck me, which is what I went with this piece, is that sort of people's gullibility. You know, the cargo cults think that someone's going to come and save them and bring them things. And this was kind of my idea of the way religions do in general. Think somebody's going to come and save us. Somebody's going to bring us something, expecting something from outside to come and save or provide. So
right, and you think it should come from yourself, right?
Yeah. I mean, there isn't someone who's going to come and do it for you.
No. Did you have a religious upbringing?
Well, I went to Catholic school for 10 years. 8 years of at St. George Ukrainian Catholic on 7th Street.
Right.
Then I went to 2 years of high school. Then I went to public school. And I always was an unbeliever, or at least considered myself agnostic or something, or atheist. And then, strangely enough, in my midlife, I think it was my midlife crisis or something, early on, I had a 5-year Catholic moment in my life. I blamed Dorothy Day and the Berrigans and
Thomas Merton?
And even the people like Chesterton.
Well, they're good and bad of all kinds. They're good Catholics.
Yeah, and well, I mean, they were thinkers. You know, they were smart people, and a lot of the things that they believed in, so did I. I mean, I had already come from a sort of anti-war background, so all this stuff fit my life. And next thing you know, I was a Catholic. That lasted for almost exactly 5 years. It felt like it came on as a drug. Like some brain chemicals I was able to believe, and then the same way it left. All of a sudden it was just slowly trickled away, and all of a sudden I was like, what am I believing here? So I'm back to being an atheist, and probably a little bit more rabidly so.
Well, there are no Berrigans and Merton around at this time.
That's true.
And there's nobody leading the Catholics, I think.
No,
radical Catholic, at least.
No, and I actually constantly am picking on the new Pope, because everybody seems to be thinking that he's some sort of, wonderful hope for the Catholic Church, and I think he's learned how to do marketing better. I think the Church has just learned how to be cooler and say the right kind of things, but if it comes down to it, they're not about to change any of the real things that I have a problem with. They're
well, so what are you thinking now? What are you into at the moment?
Well, I'm doing this artwork, and what's happened since now 4 years ago.
Let's see if I can get this. Where is this? Yeah, go ahead. Keep talking, Nick.
Oh, okay. Well, about I'm trying to think now. 3 years ago, whatever. I'm very bad at time, but
it's okay.
When I moved back to Brooklyn, not too long after that, I came back from Burning Man, and I met my current partner, Tammy Remington, who is a writer.
Yeah.
And that's been a real major thing in my life, because the creativity and everything else between us is just really, really powerful. We have our own blog, which for the most part has been her writing a story and me doing some image that's not really related to the story, but kind of goes with the feeling of it. So we're doing a lot of work like that together, trying to do a lot of work like that while maintaining regular jobs. And
Yeah, and you have a presence on Etsy. I've seen it. I've seen
Yeah.
these beautiful pictures.
yeah, I try.
Yeah.
I also, I think, as
Well-
many artists, I don't have any business. I don't have the selling knack. I don't,
Yeah.
you know. I know people who do, and you know, they end up in galleries and selling and making money. But
They look to me like museum pieces. Some of these,
oh, thank you.
they're really wonderful. Yeah.
And one other thing that I just remembered that I started almost 15 years ago was my own holiday, which is One World Orgasm Day, which is August 8th every year. The goal is sort of to invite the entire world to have an orgasm that day and hope for peace and love and whatever. But I'm kind of very playful about it. It was funny because after I set that up, about 6 years later, somebody else basically copied the entire website that I did. They even had the same questions like why, where, whatever. They were a little bit more serious about they were going to bring world peace. I don't actually think, even if we had all orgasms, I don't think we're going to have world peace. But it would distract us for a day. But I've been doing that for 15 years and just kind of getting the word out there for people to do it.
And that's August 8th.
Yeah.
Is World Orgasm Day, which
Yeah.
is this show is August 4th, so that's in 4 days.
In 4 days after
Right,
this
so
show.
you're
Make sure
urging everybody to go out and have an
Yes.
orgasm?
Yeah. With someone, by yourself, whatever it takes, you know. It was funny because when I first did it and I posted a page on my website at that time, I got an email about 6 months later from Arthur C. Clarke, and I thought, yeah, right, sure, Arthur C. Clarke. And after doing a little bit of research, I found out, I checked information that it really was Arthur C. Clarke, and he wrote me because his secretary told him about One World Orgasm Day, and he had written a story, I think he said 40 years earlier or something like that, which I can't think of the title right now. Love Saves the Day, I think. About a similar situation. The world is in some kind of danger, or meteorite, something's going to happen, and the solution that the scientists have come up with is that everyone, at that point I think they called it make love or something, because they wouldn't have suggested orgasms, but the idea was that if everyone had an orgasm, it would save the world. So it was fascinating. I still saved the email from Arthur C. Clarke.